All right. Welcome back to another episode of Inside Leadership. Today, we're here with Brian Gubernick. Now, Brian and I met probably 3 weeks ago out in Scottsdale, Arizona. We were at a summit for the Kristen Cole Network, and Brian was one of the guest speakers. And I'll tell you what, fantastic person. I'm thrilled to have you on today, Brian. Thank you for taking the time.
John, thanks for having me, man. I'm really excited. I know you and I have been trying to put this together since we were hanging out together in Scottsdale. So I'm finally here, and I'm excited to chat with you today.
And I appreciate it. I love the fact that you're working from home with the dogs today. That was a little off-camera conversation that we had earlier. So, Brian, before we get into the actual interview, tell us a little bit about yourself. What makes Brian tick?
Man, I'll try to give you the abbreviated answer to that one. So I've been in real estate since really 2005, and started actively selling in February of 2007, which is the same time I joined Keller Williams. So my entire active sales career, 15 years now plus, I just had my 15th anniversary, has been with Keller Williams. And I've been in the real estate sales industry in some capacity, one way or another, for a couple of years, but longer than that. So call it 17, 18 years in the business. I actually started, John, it surprises many. I was an accountant coming out of school. I went to school, majored in accounting, and worked for a public accounting firm. I lasted about 18 months and said, this is not for me. They never told me, like, hey, man, you're not built for a cube, right? Like the disc and these things that we have learned so much about over the years. I don't know why they didn't give me, this is Deloitte. It was Deloitte and Touche at the time, but Deloitte, which is, again, one of the largest firms in the world, they didn't do an analysis on me. So here I am. I get out of college. I'm all excited. They put me in a cube and I'm miserable. And I'm literally calling my mom and I'm like, Mom, what's wrong with me? Like, I can't adjust to the real world. In hindsight, though, they took a guy who's high D, high I and put him in a more SC type of role. And I just was a bad fit. And so, John, in Phoenix, where I live, when you don't know what you want to do with your life, what we do out here, we go get a real estate license.
Sounds like Florida.
And much like Florida. And so that's how I landed in real estate. I started in that, and then early in my career, I met my wife, who we just had our 14th anniversary.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much. And then shortly after we married, we had our first daughter, Avery, who is about to turn 12. And then we had our second daughter, Katie, who just turned 10. And so today, still very deep in real estate. But I am a dance dad, and dad of daughters. I have a very, very, female driven home.
Okay.
I do have a male Labrador to try to counteract, though we generally are losing that battle. And, life is great, man. Life is great.
Awesome. So, Brian, what's one of the best investments that you've ever made, whether it's time, money, whatever the case is? What's one of the best investments you've made?
It's a really good question. I don't know if I can narrow it down to one. I think the first thing that comes to mind, specifically around time, early, I just mentioned my daughters, and when my first daughter Avery was born, she's probably 9 months old. My business coach at the time, you may know him, a guy named Mike Fleming.
Yep.
Out of Atlanta, one of my most favorite guys on this planet. Mike, who's still my coach today, so he's been my coach for over a decade now. Mike said to me when my daughter was 9 months old, he said and I cannot do Mike's Southern accent. I'm not going to, usually I try to imitate him, but I'll save everybody from that today. But Mike said to me, he said, Brian, what ritual have you established with your daughter? I'm like, Mike, she's 9 months old. I haven't established, she doesn't want me right now. She only wants her mom. He goes, I'm telling you, you need to start establishing a ritual, a weekly ritual, whatever it may be. I want you to start that cadence now. And so I took his advice, a few months later, so she'd call it 1 year old. And I started taking her to Whole Foods every Sunday, and we'd get a green juice and we'd walk around. And that went on for a while. And then we started weekly trips to the splash pad. And we started taking weekly trips to this place or that place. And today, now she's 12. She's very much a preteen. And for the past 4 or 5 years, we have date night. So, Whole Foods to Splash Pad to whatever the next thing was, the park, eventually made its way to date night. And so, very long-winded answer to your question, I would say establishing a ritual with both of my daughters as well as my wife, a weekly ritual where it's just them and me one-on-one, and starting it really young. So as specifically my daughters get older, we're still having conversations, but they're just more mature conversations, has probably been the best investment into those relationships I've made to date. And same with my wife. So I actually go, John, I go date night Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, back to back to back with each of them, one-on-one.
That is awesome. And I know that at the end of this conversation, we're going to dig a little bit deeper into that. So
yeah,
those of you watching and listening, hold on to your seats when we get to the end of this conversation.
So for everybody, especially if you young kid, old kid, doesn't matter. If you can establish some sort of ritual today, and I'll tell you what really got me, John, and I don't know if this is you, but I'm one of those guys that says things like, oh, when I was a kid, I used to do X, Y, and Z all the time. Well, the reality is you didn't do X, Y, and Z all the time. You did it like 3 times. But in your memory, you were going to the baseball game every week, or you were going, and that was something my dad, had done for me. And that ritual, like that created these memories, these experiences, and that pay memory dividends is what I would call it. And so trying to recreate that. And then the other thing that comes to mind when you say best investment, this is material. As you may already know, John, and maybe some listeners already know, I'm kind of a psycho. I'm kind of a crazy person, especially when it comes to health and routine and trying to get the advantage or the edge. I, about 2 years ago, put a cold plunge in my backyard. So I have an ice tub.
Okay.
Legit cold plunge that has a filter on it, a chiller, and it's aesthetically nice. I would take you out to see it right now. I don't think you want to go on that journey with me, but every morning I get in the cold plunge for 3 to 5 minutes. And again, I know it's crazy.
And what temperature is that water?
The water is 39.
I'm from upstate New York, way upstate and New England, and we would call that a polar bear swim.
Well, this is a polar plunge then. So
nice.
I'll get in there. I'll sit there usually around 4 minutes. And physically, when I get out of that thing, I feel amazing. I feel a certain way. But I'll tell you the greatest advantage with it for me, what I get most out of it, aside from the scientific benefits, it's hard. I've been doing it every day for 2 years, and there's not a single time I'm about to get into that plunge that that tub that I don't say, man, this is going to suck. And I know that sounds weird, but I'm like, if I can do this and overcome this every morning, and it's hard, and there's some degree of pain that your body adjusts to within a minute and a half, mentally, if I can get over that, it kind of sets the tone for the rest of the day. And that's probably the best benefit I get from it.
Absolutely love that. So I'm not sure if we can get more quirky or odd than that, but let's go down that road. So what's one quirk or odd thing about you that many people may not know? Because we know about the cold plunge tub now.
I'll give you the first ones that come to mind. Number one, before I was in real estate, between the accounting and the real estate worlds, I had a brief stint where I owned a tanning salon of all businesses. That was my first true business I owned. I bought a tanning salon. After I met my wife shortly after opening that tanning salon. And at some point she said, okay, it's time for you to get rid of the tanning salon. We could probably put 2 and 2 together, but tanning salons.
Enough said.
Yeah. I would say that I think that people would find this weird or different, quirky. I love Disneyland. I try to go to Disneyland once to twice a year. I think I like it more than my kids. I'm just a big fan. We'll go out for a day. I will literally fly out in the morning, go to Disneyland all day, and fly home at night. I've never gone by myself, but I'm not opposed to it. and I guess it kind of leads to the last thing that does come to mind. For those that know me, I am kind of a loner. Like, I like being by myself a lot. I'm social, and I like my social circle, and I like engaging with people, but I very much appreciate, like, I can shut my door and go to work for 8 to 12 hours and walk out and feel great. Like, I don't crave the interaction at times. I like to do stuff by myself. I will go to movies by myself. I do a lot of like running and hiking and stuff all by myself. I like to be alone with my thoughts. That's a little quirky, I think.
Love it. Love it. So what habit do you have that most positively affects your life and your mindset?
For me, much like I read a lot, right? And so a lot of what I read, though, is around success. Like, what are those people around me that are successful in business, or not around me, I'm sorry, just in this world, that are successful in business or life or relationships, whatever it may be. And I had found early on, a lot of them have a morning routine. And so I did implement, a pretty stringent morning routine. That cold plunge is a component of it. Working out is a component of it. Being alone, with my thoughts is a component of it. And it's routine, it's habit for me. So morning routine is a huge deal for me. How I set myself up for the day absolutely impacts how my day is going to go. And along those lines, I think that a habit that I have, that truly impacts my life. I really, really think about this no days off concept. And John, when you were in Scottsdale, last month, I think I mentioned this during the talk I was having. I really believe that every single day, you and I and all of us, we can get better at something. And when I say no days off, I don't mean work nonstop. What I mean is every day you can take a minute, 10 minutes, an hour, and improve in some area. So maybe that's read for 10 minutes. Maybe that's go for a walk for 2 minutes. Maybe that's have a specific conversation with a specific person for 5 minutes. I just think every day we can contribute and make a difference in our personal worlds. And so the habit, I do say no days off. I do ask myself, like, what did I do today to get better at something? And if it's late at night and I feel like I haven't made that progress, or I haven't checked that thing off the list, I look around and I say, okay, what can I do right now that would make me a better dad or a better business person or a better husband or whatever it may be? And I'll go invest 2 minutes in it. And it may be like a YouTube video or whatever, or anything. I just really think that habit of I can get better every day at something has really led to a better life for me overall.
That self-accountability is completely admirable. That is awesome. Thank you, Brian.
Yeah, I don't have it on today. Instead, I have the Whoop, because I'm tracking everything. Mm-hmm. But I usually wear I'm looking around if I have one here, a no days off bracelet that I had made that just reminds me.
Love it.
Like, it's just a trigger for me.
Love it. So what bad advice do you most often hear in your profession?
I don't know if I'd call this bad advice, but one thing I don't like hearing, I always hear, hey, you got to work smarter, not harder. Work smarter, not harder. And it's not that I don't know if that's necessarily bad advice. John, I'm just a very firm believer that there is not a substitute for hard work. Like, when I look back at my career, in the areas, when I launched in the real estate, I did have a pretty solid launch phase. I did kind of hit the ground and build something pretty big rather quickly out the gate. When I look back at that time, I honestly, man, I was willing to go wire to wire day in and day out. And my battery life was incredibly high. Now, mind you, that's all I had available to me at that time, which was time, right? Like, we all have time, we all have money, and we all have influence. We have time, money, and influence when we get into business. And depending on what phase you're at in your career, you may not have all of those three things, or maybe you've got one more than others, or whatever it may be. Well, early in my career, all I had was time. I had no influence and I had no capital. I had no money. So I went hard. And so I hear, hey, work smarter, not harder. I'm not saying like it's not wise to be more intelligent around leverage and things of that nature. But I also don't want to ever see that be misconstrued. Like, you're going to have to work your ass off if you want to be successful. And when you study the Michael Jordans or the Michael Phelps or the Kobe Bryants of the world, what you're going to find are they're insanely successful because they're amazingly gifted and talented. But it's also because they put extraordinary effort working the basics relentlessly. And it's just hard work. And so I don't know. I don't like, I see kind of the new wave of agents coming in or people in the real estate industry coming in. And sometimes I want to just kind of shake them and say, listen, man, you want to be successful? Go put in 12 hours a day for a while and don't look up. Right? Don't look up and just go. Now, yep. You got to balance that and all of that. I'm not saying neglect everything else. I'm just saying, man, you got to go hard. You got to go hard if you want to win.
Love it. So what book or books do you most often recommend and why?
When I think about that question, John, I think what books have I gifted the most? I do gift a lot of books. I'm one of those guys that, like, when I buy a book, I usually buy 3 or 4. And then I will, if I like the book, I'm going to hand it out. And so the books that I have gifted the most, Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss. That was, whenever that book came out, I want to say 18 or 19. It's my favorite book of that year. I really like that book from a sales and persuasion perspective. I think communication is a basic principle of success in this industry. So I've gifted that one a ton. I've gifted The Untethered Soul by Michael Singer a lot. I love that book, especially for many of your listeners that are high D, hard charging individuals that need to kind of ground themselves a bit, slow down a little bit, detach from the outcome a bit. Untethered Soul was a game changer for me. Tax-Free Wealth by Tom Wheelwright. I love the tax and wealth game.
That's on my desk. I'm reading that one right now.
Tax-Free Wealth. And, since you mentioned that, John, after you finish that one, pick up his new one, the win-win wealth strategy. I think tax-free wealth is...
That's one of the things that Kristen has kind of said, guys, you need to read this. So I actually got them both at the same time.
Yeah. Tax-Free Wealth is better, I think, but win-win is great. And then lastly, and you and I were, I randomly mentioned this earlier when we were talking, those 2 big Tim Ferriss books, Tools of Titans and Tribe of Mentors, I have probably gifted those 2 books more than any other books out there. I think that they are fantastic books. Tools of Titans and Tribe of Mentors, 2 separate books that are just interview of those that are highly successful in their respective worlds. And I like that is when you drop on the coffee table, you sit down, you open it up to a random page, read the interview and say, I like what he or she's doing. I'm going to go implement that tomorrow. It kind of is a good reference guide when you live by that no days off principle I was talking about earlier.
Love it. So what do you do when you need to reset?
I disappear. I disappear. I will go running. I will go hiking. I mentioned I like being alone. I will go up north here in Arizona where we have a house by myself. There is a book I'm reading right now that I haven't gotten through fully, so I can't tell you if it's one of my favorites and one I'll be gifting all over the place. But conceptually, I love it. It's called 12-Hour Walk. And the story is about a guy that hiked across Antarctica solo. And he set the record. I think he did it in 54 days, I want to say. But basically, and I'll save you all the background because I know we're going to run out of time here, but he talks about his happiest times in life was when he was trekking across Antarctica, pulling a sled for 12 hours. Because as you can imagine, you were only left to yourself and your thoughts. And he said, like, it was just such an amazing, enlightening experience for him. And when, basically what he says, when he got home and COVID hit and all of that, he went into like a he got caught up with the news and he got caught up like so many of us did. And one day his wife's like, you got to stop. Like, it's time for you to get back to being you. And so he walked out the front door, and went on a walk, because he thought when I was in Antarctica, walking by myself is when I felt my best. And so he walked out his door, he starts walking, he comes home 12 hours later, and his wife's like, you're back. You've changed. You're you. And so it started this movement for him. I think he's trying to get 10 million people to go on this 12-hour walk where you literally just walk out your door and leave your phone and start going. And your physical fitness doesn't so much matter. Like if it's, if I go out, I'll walk 12 hours, but maybe if my mom went out, she'd walk the block and then sit down on the porch for a while, and then walk the block again and sit on the porch for a while. I love the idea of just going out and walking and being alone and then kind of decompress in that way. So how do I reset? Man, I just disappear. I just go do my own thing by myself and try to detach from everything.
I absolutely love that. And Brian, typically we would be wrapping up right now, but you and I talked. There's one other topic that you spoke about in Scottsdale I'd like you to touch on here. And you talked about time as it relates to family. And it was an incredibly moving and eye-opening conversation that you had with us. Take a few minutes just to kind of give a 30,000-foot view of that conversation.
Yeah, it's a subject I'm rather passionate about, and I think it's one that is hard for many of us to get our arms around, but something we absolutely should be doing in order to get the most out of our lives, because time is very finite. And the concept, what I talk around is, what my objective is to bring awareness to the fact that we are not going to be here indefinitely on this planet. I think we can all agree on that. And the relationships that we have with family, with ourselves, with our money, with our wealth, these things are, again, time is finite. And we've got to be more purposeful. Knowing that time is finite, we've got to be more purposeful in how we're approaching these things, right? So many people in our industry, if I say, go draw me a business plan, for how you're going to grow over the next 12 months, most everybody can go into their office and come back an hour later and give me a 1-3-5 thoroughly outlined as to all the action steps are going to take to get their business from point A to point B. Well, if I said, go draw me a business plan for how you're going to develop your relationship with your 11-year-old daughter over the next year, people would look at me stone-faced, like unsure where to start. And so when I realized that, it occurred to me, like, it's so easy for us to do that in certain areas, but it's so hard to do it in other areas. And those other areas where it's hard, frankly, are more important. Like, they're just more important. Like, there's not a person that on their deathbed is going to say, man, I wish I worked harder or worked more or built out a better business plan. No, what they instead say, unfortunately, is, I wish I would have spent more time with that person, or I wish I would have said, I'm sorry, or I wish I would have lived a life true to me versus what everybody expected of me. And so, to kind of bring it full circle, John, when you're out in Scottsdale, what I like to do is truly break down time, like number of days remaining in various areas of our life. And one place I go is to key family relationships. Like, for me, it's easy to talk around my daughters. And my daughters are 12 and 10. And so I just show the math, right? And I say, hey, the average kid, 0 to 18, spends 300 days per year with their parent. After 18, if they live in the same town, they spend 30 days per year with their parent. If they're not in the same town, it's 10 days per year. So 300 if you're 0 to 18, post 18, it's 30 days per year if you're in the same city. And so, without going through all of this, what I'll do is math it all out and say, hey, with my 12-year-old, I've spent 3,600 total days with her. I'm going to live, Brian will live to a certain age. I can figure out how many more days I have remaining. And so what the sobering, conclusion here is that, you take a 10-year-old or a 12-year-old, if you do the math, what you're going to find is you've already spent half of your total time with that child on this planet already. And so, when I bring that up, John, and you were in the room when we did this, it's hard for many. It's very hard to hear it. And I don't apologize, because my objective is to bring awareness to it. Because now that it's hard, the question becomes, now that you're aware, the question is, what are you going to go do about it? Like, if I know I've already spent, a certain amount of time with my kids, I'm halfway there, and I only which is very sober. Like, it's with my daughter, it's technically 54%. I'm at 54%. So I've got 46% more time remaining, and she just turned 12. So how am I going to cheat the system? How am I going to create more days so that I'm not the status quo? So I'm not like everybody else. How am I going to get more out of those days so that I don't live like everybody else? And the example I like to give, John, I talk about when you go to the beach or when you go skiing or whatever it may be, when that 12-year-old asks me to go in the ocean with her, so many people look around the beach and you'll say, you'll see them, they're reading their book or they're having their beer and they're like, nah, and they just let the kids go out there and play. And I respect that. I get it. But for me, I'm like, how many more days is my daughter going to actually ask me to go in the ocean with her? I've got a 12-year-old daughter. Now, she may live with me till she's 18, but I'm going to guess like by 14, 15, if she's asking me to still go in the ocean with her versus the friends she's now brought to the beach, I'm on borrowed time. So the reality is I've got a couple more years of these kids saying, come throw me in the waves, come explore with me. Again, it's very sobering. It's hard to hear, but I'm aware of it. So now when they ask me these things, you better believe I go all out. I'm going to try to squeeze as much out of that as I can. And John, again, this, as you know, it's a much longer conversation, but the point I'm trying to make is bring awareness to these things, then get purposeful around the outcomes you want to have. Design your business plan, but for your relationships and for your life and for these other things. So you don't ever look back and say, man, I wish I would have. I wish I would have, fill in the blank. So again, it's a tough topic to only spend 5 minutes on, but it's one that I think we could all be thinking about. And every one of us, myself included, we could do a better job with, for sure.
Yes, it's a tough topic for 5 minutes. And I would venture to say that 99.9% of the people will be hearing it from this vantage point for the very first time. Because the way you bring it, the way you deliver it is incredibly unique. Sobering is an understatement. Like I said, it was like your life stopped in the room in Scottsdale. And I appreciate you being strong enough to be able to have that conversation. Because I, for one, could not stand up in a room in front of 100 people and have that conversation without bawling my eyes out.
Well, I'll tell you, man. So you I don't know if you know this. So shortly after we were together in Scottsdale, that same week, my friends Ben and Chris were running that Built How event in Phoenix. And I talked around time at that Built How event. Well, from the time you and I met at Kristen Cole's event until that Built How event, something occurred for me at home. And it sounds so trivial, but my older daughter, I said to her, honey, what are we doing for Halloween this year? And she goes, what do you mean? I go, what do you mean? What do I mean? Like, I literally, like, I rent a golf cart, I dress up, I go all out because of these things we're talking about. And she says, I could see like something was weird. And she's like, well, I'm going to go out with my friends. We're going to go trick or treat in the neighborhood. And she didn't say these words, but what she was thinking is, you're not invited, Dad. And it hit me. Now, mind you, I'm the guy that stands up and talks around this stuff, but it hit me that now my daughter's 12. I'm done. She's now written me out of Halloween. And I respect it. I love it. I let her go do her thing. It didn't occur to me, John, that 11, 12 years old, they now want to go trick or treat with their friends. And my days of taking out my daughter, who in my mind sometimes is still 3 years old, holding my hand. My Halloween days, my trick or treat days with that kid are over. And I wouldn't have done it differently. Fortunately, I've been going all out on Halloween and trick or treating with them and dressing up and doing these things I don't really love, but I love being with them. But between the time we met and the time I went to present, I added a slide to my deck that was a picture of my daughter in her Halloween costume. And I let everybody know that 2 days ago, 2 days prior, she had let me know that my days of trick-or-treating with her were over. And it just, like, I immediately went to, man, did I have as much fun as I could have had? Did I do that? I don't regret anything. I'm just saying, like, it was like, that's what I'm talking about. So I bring up Halloween because of the timing of this conversation here. I don't know when you put this out, John, but Halloween is coming up, or it's going to be just past us, something like that. If you're hearing this beforehand, make sure, if you have kids and you have that opportunity, get out there, because it could, it could be one of the last times, if not the last time, as I just recently discovered.
Brian, absolutely amazing stuff. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to spend a few minutes with us. Again, Brian Gubernick is with Keller Williams out in Phoenix, Scottsdale, Arizona. And I will make sure that his contact information is here for everybody. If you want to reach out to him, I'm sure he'd be happy to be able to speak to you or your office. Brian, again, thank you very much. I appreciate your time.
John, thank you. Really appreciate it. Great job today.
Thank you.